Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're just going to give it a couple of seconds as folks continue to log in, but I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Daniel, to get us started as we're very excited for today's offering.
Thanks, Diana. Yes, welcome everyone. Good morning. So my name is Dan. I am with the Community Technical Assistance Center at McSilver. Really excited to welcome you all today to today's webinar, Supporting Positive Black Youth Development Within a Racialized Society. So before we get started, I did want to just take a moment to orient everyone so that you know how to participate in today's event. So please know upon joining the webinar, you have been muted to avoid any background noises that may distract others from listening to the presentation. If you have any technical issues during today's event, please chat it to the hosts, including myself and Diana, who will be able to assist you in addition to Kiara, our CTAC admin for today. You will also have the opportunity to submit questions from the Q&A portion of today's presentation by utilizing the chat box feature, which you can find by clicking on the dialog bubble on the toolbar at the bottom of your screen to open the feature. In order to ensure that we are able to answer as many questions as time permits, we are requesting that you send in your questions at any point during the webinar, and we will address them during the Q&A portion of the presentation. If you can, we would also appreciate if you could take a moment to fill out the brief feedback survey that will appear on the screen after you close out the webinar, and let us know if you have any suggestions or on topics you'd like us to cover. The recording and presentation slides for this presentation will be posted on our website, ctagny.org, within the next 2 or 3 business days. So before we get fully started, just wanted to share with everyone this disclaimer, trigger and content warning, because our presenter will share real stories from a historical context and how it relates to the times we are living in, including through Mr. Richardson's personal experiences. Some of the pictures are alarming and may cause strong emotions. So please take a brief moment to identify how you might need to support yourself as you continue through the parts of the presentation that may be challenging for you. So we are very excited to have with us today, all the way from Wisconsin, Clem L. Richardson. He is trained as a professional counselor and is a clinical substance abuse counselor and master addiction counselor. So Clem, thank you for joining us. I will now pass along to you as our special guest to get us started. And I will also jump in and out throughout the presentation to support and moderate as well.
Thank you for having me, you all. Thank you, Daniel, for the awesome introductory. How you doing, colleagues? Good to see everybody, and glad you're part of this webinar. So what you will learn, by the end of this presentation, attendees, you'll be able to explain the historical events in Black history and their impact on mental health and the substance use. So you'll be able to unpack that for your clients or consumers or who you're working with. You'll also be able to recognize the relationships to practicing with a framework informed by historical context and systemic oppression. Also, you'll be able to identify ways to engage with Black youth using a strength-based approach. That's how I usually work with the youth that I'm working with here in Wisconsin. You will use a youth-guided, you will learn about a youth-guided and person-centered approach to counseling. And so you will come hear from that. All right, someone in the chat said they couldn't hear, but so what are your thoughts about seeing this image? Put the chat in the responses in the chat, please. What are your thoughts? Anger. Okay, somebody said anger. Somebody said chest. Powerful, disturbing. See the colors. Frightening. Okay. All right, needed, disturbing, scary, unsettling, frustrating. Thank you, racism and stereotypes. That's so true. Thank you all for putting that in there. Stereotypical, someone said stereotypical. Starting point with 2 point at the table. Okay, so the eye for eye leaves, war, okay. Somebody said war, collected clan hoods, remember he has converted. That start right there. Someone just hit the nail on the head. What happened is you see the Ku Klux Klan man with the knife and he's moving the white chess pieces, right? But then you have the black guy right here and you know, the Ku Klux Klan was known for violence and continue to perpetuate the violence and all that kind of stuff, right? Well, you see now where a lot of the black young men, such as myself, not all, but just some, have perpetuated the same violence that was inflicted on them. And now they don't pick up knives, they pick up guns. And now we have a perpetual violence and genocide in our communities. Because why? We learned it from here, and we continue to do it, inflict it on ourselves to this day. So this is where a lot of the young men that I work with see. They look from this lens. Yes, the violent predator and the paranoid victim, that's true. And so when a person is fearful and violent, especially towards others, they pick up a gun and do what they do. The media told them that they are bad, that there's no good, disenfranchised. So they see someone that look like them. I'm not nobody because somebody told me I'm nothing, so you're nobody either. So they have no disregard for life. All right, so next slide. So today, this is Black History Month. And Black history and Black resistance in America's cycles of trauma and triumphs. So you're gonna hear me unpack and talk about the trauma, and we kind of put that disclaimer out there, but then we're gonna talk about the triumphs too as well. Keep this in mind, that the historical trauma, the communities experience trauma as a result of specific aspects of their identity within history. Examples I'm going to include groups of people who have experienced genocide, displacement, and enslavement. The historical trauma can negatively impact the mental, physical, and the emotional and financial health of those groups today and damage families, communities, and cultures.
Thanks, Clem, for sharing this. I just wanted to say that it is so important for people to understand that adverse responses to traumas that happened in the past really seem to endure among descendants, and really knowing about these all really conveys the importance of a full assessment that is inclusive of historical trauma.
Thank you. So according to my research, white settlers created the slave clothes. So we have Black people that were enslaved in America. A lot of my ancestors were governed by slave codes. For example, they could not, I repeat, they could not live by themselves. They could not live by themselves because you had the slave catchers, who was the police at that time. And then they also travel. They couldn't travel without a pass. They could not gather in groups. They could not own any weapons at that time because they was afraid of a revolt or Black resistance. They couldn't buy or drink alcohol as it would damage property. So you have to look at it from this way. At their time, from the historical context, they could not drink alcohol because of damage to property. They had to go out and pick cotton. They had to go out and pick tobacco and all that kind of stuff, right? So there was damage to property. Blacks, we was looked at as property, you know, and so with that, doing so could cause financial loss and slave revolts. So what does this sound like? Put that in the chat. What does this sound like right here? What does it sound like to you? Control, yes. Susan, yes. Trauma, oppression, yep. Yep, white supremacy, fear. Thank you, Danielle. Trauma, yes. Systemic, awesome. Thank you. You people, awesome, awesome. Yes. All right, next slide. Capitalism. Yes, we're going to talk about capitalism in coming up. So here, in contrast, see, the educated sober slave, sober scholar was a problem. So what does that mean? When a slave was drunk and the slaveholder had no fear that he would plan and revolt. So they had no fear that he would escape to the north. So in other words, a person that's under the influence of drugs or alcohol, they knew that they could oppress and depress them, and they could become dependent on the different laws and the codes that they put in place. But it was this sober thinking slave who was dangerous and needed the vigilance of his master to keep him a slave. So they knew that if someone was educated and that was a scholar, they had a problem with that because they looked at him as a smart Negro. They looked at him as a smart colored person. They looked at him as a gentleman and a scholar, or a woman that was very educated and very smart. So in contrast, you see the one, they said you can't drink and use alcohol, but they use, and I'll share it in another slide where they talk about, they use them to drink, and they call them battle royales where they fought. Yes, that's right. Frederick Douglass was looked at as different because he was in the in-house. They had in-house slaves and out-house slaves. So Frederick Douglass would learn the English language learn how to speak well, and was educated through his masters. Yes, that's so true.
I'm loving the chat interactions. We have such a really good group today, right?
Good interaction. I love it.
I also just wanted to comment here briefly because when Diane and I were going over these slides with you, I was initially confused, right? We were initially confused about this slide versus the other one, where on the one hand, slave codes might say that enslaved persons could not drink, so as not to become, damaged property. And yet at the same time, there was this conflicting message that the sober individuals could also become an educated threat and rebel. So whether limiting it or promoting it among the enslaved, there is this kind of evolution of how alcohol is a substance that is itself a form of control, depending on the circumstances, in order to reinforce slavery, which, the chat really indicates that people are really getting at that as well.
That's right. That's so true, Daniel. The educated slave, they was intimidated by it because it creates freedom, power, and you become self-sufficient. Okay, so profit for pain. So it kind of ties into what Daniel and I are just discussing. Enslaved person in the U.S. could be called upon to perform their owners as forms of entertainment. So in other words, they consider only Black people can dance and sing and crack jokes. They look at us as educated and scholars because at that time we wasn't allowed to read, and so. But men who were enslaved also had difficult tasks of fighting for their masters too as well. So what does that mean? They would put on these fights, and they call the battle royales. So they arranged these fights with bare knuckle young men, and anywhere teenagers actually, and they were enslaved, and they would beat each other with a bloody battle until some of them near death. So they would earn no reward. It would be like probably some alcohol or something like that. And the alcohol and things that they would drink was from the bottom of the residue from the beer hops, and whiskey. So it was called the end fights. Slave owners of different plantations matched their enslaved men by betting on them, and they would place bets. That's where boxing come from, actually. If you heard of Jack Johnson, he was a powerful heavyweight boxer during that time, and he was picked out of that community of boxing, and that's how he got famous for that. And at the time, this is like back in the 1920s and 30s, Jack Johnson, and he married a white woman, which was very controversial. In England, they was okay with biracial marriages, so he fled there. And when he got back to the United States, they took him into custody, did some time for some other things. But anyway, the profit for pain. They always looked at a way, even from 1619 to doing even this time, we're going to talk about how do we defeat this, James. You're right. We're going to talk about that on the back end. How can we defeat it? I agree. So how to make money off of Black folks' misery. They always found a way to do that. All right. The intergenerational trauma. So this right here's term was used by Dr. Joy DeGruy. She says post-traumatic slave syndrome. is a condition that exists when a population has experienced multi-generational trauma resulting from centuries of slavery, and we still continue to experience that oppression and institutionalized racism to the day. A lot of the different laws and policies that have been put in place have impacted our culture. And still to this day, we're fighting for the Voters Act. We're fighting for the redlining and predatory lending laws, still fighting for, the right to vote. So there's a lot of different things we're still fighting for. And we're not talking about hundreds of years ago. We're just talking about from 1970s, 80s, and even the 60s that time. We're still fighting from those issues that's still going on to this day. That's still impacting us right here, right now.
Yeah, I really appreciate this important reminder, Clem. When the effects of oppression and historical trauma manifest in one generation, it will undoubtedly impact the next. So, grandparents' responses to individual and societal oppression, for example, impact parents who then impact their children. And so we really need to factor in the role of intergenerational trauma as we work with our youth and families. I also just wanted to do a quick self-care reminder for everyone. Again, some of this content may cause distress, so please do take care of yourselves. And we are doing a little bit of a history lesson here, but after hearing all this history, we will be hearing from Clem about his personal experiences in about 15 to 20 minutes.
So another one was Marcus Garvey, who was Black resistance in a racialized society. So how he, Jamaican-born Black nationalist leader, he was a political activist. He was a journalist, a publisher. He also entrepreneur and an orator. So he spoke out against the different issues that was going on in that time. He was the one that founded the Pan-African movement, which is talking about going back to Africa. Even with the flag he created, the red, black, and the green. The red is for the blood that my ancestors went through, the beaten and shed with their blood. The black is for the blackness, the melanated people. And the green was the land of the Africa, the green land, And so with that, he founded the Universal Negro Improvement Association in the early 1920s. I mean, he was way ahead of his time. And so just awesome that, Marcus Garvey was a powerful trendsetter, and still to this day, I mean, entrepreneurial. I mean, he just did a lot of great things. He was a trendsetter. So grateful for that. Also with Tulsa, Oklahoma, if anybody familiar with the Black Wall Street? Okay. Awesome. So yes, this after the Reconstruction of Slavery. So after 1865, 1863, we was the proclamation, Lincoln freed the slaves. Okay, we got that. And so now we started building and growing at this time. And one of the areas where it was awesome and they was really building is Tulsa, Oklahoma. They became self-sufficient. They had over 600 buses. They had hospitals. They had beauty parlors. They had their own restaurants. They had banks. So they was really thriving and putting all their resources together. They practiced the group economics. They bought the politicians, and then they spent money in their own communities, And so there's a story that goes that that if you I think I read this somewhere, in the white community, the dollar circles about 21 days, and the Hispanic community circulate about 15 days, and the Black community circulate about 8 hours. So in other words, these Black people work together to build. What happened was that first slide, what I showed you. KKK came and dropped the bomb in that community and devastated a lot of our Black leaders that they were advancing at that time. And if you can see to your right, these are some of the ones that happened. So thank you. So the anti-Black advancement. So after World War I, the horrific race riots happened across the U.S. So you see that. I just talked about that. The Tulsa, Oklahoma riot in Oklahoma. So it was so bad. It was a 24-hour destructive, horrific event that took place in thriving Black communities. And so that was devastating. The massacre with over 250 people that was killed, according to the research. There was over 1,000 Black homes and businesses bombed and set on fire. Set on fire right there. So this, if you look at the screen, there's a picture that's taken from there. Actually, there was so bad, Daniel, that they had buried a lot of the bodies in the graves on top of one another. So they just did a documentary doing COVID 2020, 2021, the CBS documentary, where they, some of the family members are seeking reparations from what happened to their ancestors, to their grandparents. And so they had to dig up some of the bones and bodies and found that there are bodies stacked on one another. So the domestic terrorism happened on this soil. The first time domestic terrorism happened here in the United States was on Tulsa, Oklahoma, by the KKK. No one was ever taken to trial. No one was ever convicted for that. And so you see a lot of the family members of those, their ancestors, are really seeking resources from that. Really are. So here you probably saying, well, how did this connection relates to Black, racialized, helping youth in the Black racialized society and whatnot? Because there's a connection between racism and economic oppression. If Dr. King and Malcolm X, I respect dearly, and said this right here. Instead of the Negro leaders having the Black man begging for a chance to dine in their white restaurant, the Negro leaders should be showing the Black man to do something to strengthen his economy, to give himself independent economy, or to provide the job opportunities for himself, not begging for a cup of coffee in a white man's restaurant. So Malcolm X, I love him. He talks about how we need to become self-sufficient, how integration really messed a lot of our cultures up, because a lot of our Negro baseball leagues are no longer around. A lot of the inventions and things that we invented, people have stolen a lot of different ideas, okay? A lot of people that went into the music industry and that whatnot have lost that because the rights and the masters were owned by our whites and other cultures. So those are some of the issues that he was talking about, that we should be more economically astute and more focused on becoming self-sufficient and spend money in our own communities. The next slide. Amen, Shamika. So here, wealth gap disparity. So here, now we just kind of go back to 1968. This right here was a few years before he was assassinated. And here, unemployment rates for Black families at times a white family is the same as it is now. So what does that mean? The whites have 7 times more income compared to Blacks. They have 9 times more income compared to Hispanics. So here, the median income of whites workers is 28%. More than Black workers, median income is 35%, and more than Latinx workers' median income. So how did they get that income like that? Well, it started from the beginning. When the New World, when they human trafficked us from 1619 to the United States, I was reading an article that talked about we got issue right here. We got free land and we have free labor. The free land was what they stole and taken from the Native Americans, and the free labor is what they had with Black Americans. That's how they developed their wealth, because land was given to our whites, free land was given to them. And they needed someone to till and work the land, which is a lot of my ancestors that went through that. So King says this, the Nobel Peace Prize, here he says, there's nothing new about poverty. What is new, however, is that we have the resources to get rid of it. So what are we saying? We have the resources. If you see now in the news media where they're with the no disrespect to anyone who's Ukrainian, my heart goes out to what happened, what's going on with Russia and the wars and all that, but inviting them, allowing them to come over to the United States. And he said they could get housing, they can get on Social Security, and they can get all kind of resources that's available. All right. Where a lot of our Blacks were here, my ancestors were here way before anyone and could not get any resources. And they cut a lot of the resources in the community. So you see the disparity there with the oppression, and things are still happening to this day. What would Dr. King say if he were alive today? Somebody put that, can you go back to that, Daniel? Sorry about that. What would he say? Someone says facts, Jacqueline, all right. I think he would say, my dream has become a nightmare. Yes. Yes, he's turning over in his grave. Okay. Yes. Yes. No progress. That's true. And we're not talking about way back. We're talking about just 1968. I was born around that time. So it's not that far away. Even though Daniel might think I'm kind of older, but I'm not that far away, Daniel. I'm still. All right. He'd be angry. That's right. It's called righteous indignation, where you're angry about what's happening. That's so true. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you. So then go back to the next. Go back, Daniel, one more slide. Okay, come on to the next one. All right, thank you. So here you have, so kind of bringing it up to the war on drugs is a war on Black families. That's just my thought. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be against the war on Black, but by getting the public, now this is a writer, Chief John Elrich says this, that by getting the public to associate the hippies with the marijuana and Blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities, Elrich said. So that's what he says in his article. We could arrest these leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. What does that sound like? This sounds like it's still going on to this day. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. So what's that's going on? So here at this time, they knew that they had the war. They had the Vietnam War, and then they had the hippies that was hanging out with the Black communities and whatnot. They was doing marijuana, and they was talking about Black power. And at this time, they had killed off King, they killed off Malcolm, they killed off Megan Evers. So a lot of these people were assassinated. So they didn't have any leaders at this time. So now you had the different rising of the different gangs in the communities that were rising up. You had the Black Gangster Disciples from Chicago. You had the Bloods and the Crips out of California. You know, so you had people that was forming a different gang culture because of what was happening in the community. They had to protect the community, and these people rose up. All right, next slide. To protect their community. No, it's the real deal. So the FBI war on the civil rights movement. So the goal was they didn't want another civil rights movement to happen. So the 1970s here, see the Black Panther Party of Self-Defense by Huey P. Newton. He was an educated man, but he went through a lot of different challenges because he was standing up for what was right. Then they had the Stokely Carmichaels, who explained that he was a part of the civil rights movement, but then he found out that, when they killed out King, he went over to become the Black Panther movement. And so he called Black people to begin to become self-sufficient and define their own goals. And so they say, let's take this young man out. I think he was only like 21, 22 when they assassinated him because he was so radical. So now you have all these leaders who were talking about resistance and issues in a racialized society at that time. Now this right here is the 70s. Now go to the next slide. So now you say, okay, yeah, Judas and the Black Messiah. Yeah, it was a good movie, powerful movie. So now you see, they say, okay, well, a lot of the leaders were killed. So now you see a lot of athletes. You see a lot of Black entrepreneurs are thriving at this time. They went from trauma to triumph. So now you have George Johnson, who has his own hair care products. Okay, that he started to, remember they was talking about the Black is beautiful, and Black is beautiful. I'm telling you. So they started talking about the rich hair products and how we look beautiful and all that. So just trying to dispel some of those myths. Then you had Muhammad Ali, who was boxing professional. He was really good, but he didn't want to go to the war. He said, I'm going to fight a yellow man's war when we got a war right here in the United States against Black people. So he started to talk about the different issues that was happening in his community. And he said, man, forget this. I'm not going to the war for Vietnam. And he continued to box and whatnot. And he stood up against what was happening. Shirley Chisholm stood up and fought for what's right. She was the first Black congresswoman in Congress to talk about different issues and confront certain things in the community. So now we people seeing this in the 70s are like, okay, well, they must be doing good. It's okay. Racism is over with now. We got Black people on TV now, and they're speaking for us. And they're in Congress, they're in sports, they must be doing good. Next slide. Now you hear the exploitation in entertainment. So here you have the Black exploitation, where you have them, the man right here was Superfly, Ryan O'Neal, had him dominant over women. You know, it's okay to have power and control over women, okay? And then it was a man's world, and you don't do nothing but take advantage, you know, do what I tell you to do. So it was dictatorship by sexism and being able to make money and make a profit. So they started exploiting them. Then you would see them in different roles with guns, like Pam Grier, who's here. Thank you for here. And she had a gun and was talking about, you know, how Black women are powerful, how they're angry, how they're, you know, violent, and their bodies are shaped a certain way. So it was just sexism and things of that nature to make money off them because of how they look and how they make money at the box office. Then you had Rudy Ray Moore. You know, yes, that's right, Black exploitation. That's right. And so Rudy Ray Moore, you saw this on television. He's got a machine Tommy gun. You saw this only in gangster movie. So what it does, it feeded the negative stereotype, because we didn't see King anymore on TV. You know, I didn't, you know. And so in the 70s coming up, you start seeing this. So if you see youth are seeing this type of propaganda, seeing this type of stuff, then they say, okay, it's a Black face. Well, this is what needs to be happening. This is what needs to be done. Claudine, that's true. Claudine was another movie with James Earl Jones and Irene Cara playing, and a movie where they said that James Earl Jones could not live in her house if he made money, because this house is for her and her 5 or 6 kids. And she was on welfare. It was, yeah, Julia, yes. And so thank you. And so with that movie, he had to hide everything. She would hide everything. If she got a new toaster, a new clothes, she would hide certain things because she couldn't have, she had to be really dirt poor, Claudine, in order to get welfare from the system. Another form of Black exploitation. So now at this time, women, if you want government assistance, you cannot have a man living in the house. Men would have to be moved out of the house in order for her to get government assistance. If he was there, they would cut the resources. So this is where you started seeing a lot of that take place too as well. And people started seeing this on television. And I look at entertainment is to contain you. It enters your mind, and I tell the youth, and subconsciously is to contain you so you can change the narrative. When you see the negative stereotypes, if you continue to watch it and believe it, you become a self-fulfilling prophecy to say that this is what I'm supposed to do. This is what I'm supposed to be doing right here. And so a lot of our young Black youth, not all, but a lot of them, believe that. That's why they buy into the rap. That's why they buy into the violence. That's why they buy into the video games, because it's about capitalizing and exploitation and making money off people's misery.
Yeah, Clem, it's kind of what we've been talking about throughout the whole presentation so far. There is this kind of profit from objectification and Black violence, right? There's this narrowing of what Black success looks like, a reinforcement of the stereotypes, right? The glorification of stereotyping associated with violence, sexism, power, control, and objectification. So, really thank you for bringing this point home.
No problem, sir. Thank you. So then we go into this, okay, this is coming out of the 70s, and you had all these people that's doing great. It's, oh, they're doing great. They're in the White House. Oh, they're in here with Jimmy Carter. He's great. All right. So now the war on drugs in the 80s. Some of you probably remember that. In the 80s, the war on drugs. The 1980s skyrocketed. Okay, so it's pretty much the same thing that happened. It just changed to different names. Slavery under another name. That's why we just call it. Okay, Daniel. So the war on drugs in 1980 skyrocketed. So Nancy Reagan begins to just say no campaign. All right. So she will come to these urban communities and sit there and sitting in front of Black children, like Black children can't read or something. And so they would set up these prompts and say, just say no, just say no. But I believe she was struggling with some substance or something too as well, alcohol or something. And so they need to just say no. And I read an article that I was reading and it said, you just say no to the cartels. Just say no to selling the drugs in the community and bring them into the communities. That was the issue right there. And so the 1986 Anti-Drug Abuse Act, the federal law signed by Nixon, and increased the mandatory minimum offenses for drugs. So let me unpack that. So with the drug issue right here, you saw more Black men and Black, brown, and yellow men going to prison for non-violent crimes for drug possession. Over 50% of prisoners in the U.S. prison system were jailed for drug offenses. All right? Unjust and destructive impacts on our Black communities. A lot of the biased laws were put into effect, and that's right. Reagan them and the Iran-Contra scandal in Central America brought the drugs in our communities. So let's go to the next slide. Sound like I'm talking to some good people here. So they use a Black face to bring in the drugs. So what I'm saying, so in the 1980s and 1990s, Rick Ross was a drug dealer, drug kingpin. So he was connected with the Iran-Contra scandal. He was hooked up with the CIA and the Nicaragua Contra army that Reagan then funded them weapons. Not only weapons, in strategically they did it, that's true. They wanted not just weapons, they said bring the drugs in the community too as well, because I gotta pay these people back and they need to be paid back with money, not with drugs. Take the the drugs in the urban communities so we can kill them all. Because in other words, they didn't want any other civil rights movement to rise up. They didn't want any other Black community to rise up as far as a Black Panther movement. So put the drugs in the community and let's wipe them out. It's population extermination. So this is what strategically planned. Poverty was strategically put into action, and the drugs were strategically put in our communities, just like they did in the 60s and 70s with the heroin epidemic. When the Black men came back from the Vietnam War, they couldn't even get any money and they fought in the war. So this is the same strategic thing. Next slide, please, sir. So the 1989, yes, I'm coming out of high school this time. President Bush, he's on live TV. The war on drugs continued. So with the war on drugs, what it did with the Black community, it came after the war on drugs was war on us, meaning they criminalized us. Look at these crack cocaine addicts, put them in jail. When really at that time, we needed mental health and drug treatment, not prison, because you have more people who use drugs than sell it. You may have a few sell it, the big timers like Rick Ross, he was selling it. He was a big time because he was connected with that. But then you have the low level person that's using it, selling it to make money to get out of poverty, but also become addicted to it because of the trauma that they may have been through, and they use it to cover up their emotions. With our white, let's fast forward to the right now, here and right now. With our white counterparts, can we go back to that right there? With our white counterparts, well, no, you're right, Daniel. We'll go. Thank you. So let's continue. In the 1990s, how the crime bill, the mass incarceration just really skyrocketed because they started making money hand over fist now. Because now they got privatized prisons, and you had Clinton says lock them up. You had what's her name? Hillary Clinton start calling them super predators, where they label black men, black youth, labeled us as super predators, that we're violent and thuggish and all that, and hooked on drugs. So that stereotype still, it impacted our community. The biological warfare and the all that's impacted us. The AIDS epidemic impacted our community, and the crack cocaine epidemic impacted our community. The biological and psychological warfare, still we're trying to recover back from that. Then you have it here, the No Child Left Behind, where the financial crisis of 2008 involvement in where Bush was in office really impacted the community here. This really did a devastation, because it's about No Child Left Behind. Okay, well, you put these child in, if they have a learning disability, if they have a reading disability, if they have a spelling disability, you tell the mother that she can get a check for them. And so what the mother does, put the kids in a school, might be in suburbs, but they'll get money in these charter schools for a black kid because he can't read or do math. And so with that, what it does is it definitely puts stereotypes on these kids. And what it does is they, once they get these labels put on them, it's hard for them to deal with it, and they get cheesed by those other children, and then you continue to perpetuate the same thing. The involvement in the Afghanistan and Iraq issue is a big issue. Bush them said that they're looking for the weapons of mass destruction. The weapon of mass destruction was here in the United States when they was bringing trafficking, because Afghanistan makes more heroin, poppy seeds than anything in heroin. So you've been over there for 20 years. Is it by chance, do you think that the heroin epidemic has anything to do with the Afghanistan? While they was in Afghanistan, put that in the chat. While they was in Afghanistan. Yes, that's right. Because Daniel, the poppy plant, seed plant, grows, and the oil comes from that. They produce heroin. There was no weapons of mass destruction over there. It was violent. They killed a lot of their leaders, same way as they did the leaders here in the United States. And it started mass producing and bringing opiate. So now we have an opiate issues. I ain't never seen it in my life. You have more white people ODing and dying from opiate use, but they don't get criminalized. They get treatment. Come on, if any white brothers and sisters in the chat, put that in there. They get treatment. They got Narcan to save their life. They go to programming. They don't criminalize them. But in the black community, when crack cocaine was around, put them up, put them in jail, lock them up for good. When we needed treatment, we did not get it. So today, now they got all kinds of programs available, even with this right here. So what are your thoughts seeing this image? Chat. Put this in the chat, your responses.
We are about 5 slides away from hearing Clem's personal story, everyone, if you're eagerly anticipating that. So just letting you all know, because it is something that will be really making all of what we're learning so far feel more real for everyone.
Hurt, yes. Injustice, racism, yes. Yes, that's so true. And thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Awesome, colleagues. I'm your colleague. So we're talking. I hope you guys are getting something out of this. So we got to save our kids. What I mean by that, I don't care if a kid, can you go back to the slide one more time? Black, brown, or yellow, we got to save them. So we see that, and a lot of the youth that come to me and say, hey, well, why I'm still incarcerated for a car theft, and my white friend, he got out because he's got caught with cocaine or heroin. The disparity. Why did he get 6 drunk drivings? I only got 1 drunk driving, and I got to do 6 years. He gets programming. Disparity there. So that's the, disenfranchised. Thank you. Preferential treatment. That's true. So here, according to statistics, confirmed drug overdose. This is just 3 years ago. This is Milwaukee County. In Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where I'm from, you have over 54.7% whites. You have blacks is 28.6%, and you have 13% Hispanic. So you have more of our white brothers and sisters who's dying from drugs and alcohol, especially the opiate overdose. Well, it's hard to say opiate. We're talking about fentanyl because they're putting fentanyl in the heroin and the meth now. And you see more whites using meth, and blacks are still using cocaine. But people usually use drugs at the same amount, but white have more resources available to use it. The black youth are 9 times more likely than white youth to go to adult prison. Do you know that they waive, and I know in Wisconsin, they waive our adult, our youth to prison for nonviolent crimes? Okay, so Wisconsin, let's talk about it. Wisconsin here in 2018, which ranks 14th in the nation for the largest racial disparity in arrest of marijuana possession. That's so true. And so with that right there is black people are 4.2 times more likely than white people to be arrested for marijuana possession. That's true. Arrests for the possession of marijuana made up 57% of all drug arrests in the state. That's true. So what I can say about that, these black youth who smoke marijuana, or young adults smoke marijuana, will get revocated and go to prison for smoking marijuana. Not commit another crime like robbing a bank or battery or something like that. Marijuana use, which their white counterpart will get treatment and get the help they need. Let's do a compare in New York. So New York ranks 40th in the nation for the largest racial disparity in arrests in marijuana. Black people are 2.6 times more likely than white people to be arrested for marijuana possession. Possession made up 54% of drug arrests. So look at this, systemically cross cities. We're talking about Milwaukee, Wisconsin, then we go to New York, same thing, according to this ACLU, same thing. The goal is about economics and finances to wipe this population out. These youth should be, if a person is doing marijuana, but now you got white men who own these dispensaries. But 10, 15 years ago, they lock us up. Now they're making money off of it. They're becoming millionaires. Some of them even quit working in government to open up their own dispensaries now. So what I'm saying, this ties into the prison pipeline. So the prison pipeline, globally, the US has the highest incarceration rate in the world. We lock up more people than in China, than in Russia, than in Afghanistan. I mean, we just lock up more people. African Americans and Latinos are jailed at the highest rates of any other people. Schools and foster care involvement often lead to prison reentry. What I mean by schools? So for example, at schools, a kid can have an argument or they can have a fist fight. So now they get a disorderly conduct ticket. They usually call the police before they try to have a mediator. Back in my day, they had a mediator, someone that can talk or resolve the situation or have conflict resolution. Now you don't see that. So call the police. Now this kid has a ticket. So the mother can't pay the ticket because she's got to work. And so got to show up at court. She can't show up at court because she got to work. Now there's a warrant out for this kid arrest. Then the kids become impacted by this. the impact of trauma and oppression is still challenging, meaning a person goes from the lows to the highs and try to excel and go up, but then you get cut down due to systemic issues and oppression and laws. Then it goes down and kills another person's progress. Then you're hopeful, everything's going up. I hope everything's working out. We got a leader. Oh, then the leader gets assassinated or killed. So this emotional roller coaster, because the impact of trauma and oppression still impacting some of us to this day. So if you see this picture right here to your left, this guy's incarcerated. And what it does, anytime you take the father out of the home, it impacts the children. Even if whatever type of family dynamic you may have, it impacts the children, period. So usually if you have, I come from a traditional family home where usually, but I'll talk about that in a minute. I just grew up with a single mom. She did the best that she can do. But anytime that father is not in the home, the family is impacted, like this family right here. I know someone right now who been incarcerated. He was incarcerated. His granddaddy was incarcerated. His grandfather was incarcerated. Now his son was incarcerated. I'm talking about 32 years. This guy did 32 years. He had faced 100 years in prison, gave him 32 years. Another guy did 20 years. Another guy did, 42 years. And now they're normalized. Now all of his sons been in prison because of the impact of the way he was thinking, how it impacts his children and the ripple effect. So some people normalize dysfunction. And like I tell them, young man, it's not normal. We have to break that generational cycle. There's something you have to do to break that generational cycle with our young people that you're working with. And I'll explain that a little bit more.
Yeah, so, I think it's really, really important what you're saying to understand the importance of contextualizing here, right? Like we look at these two images and sometimes it becomes really easy to blame the imprisoned Black father or the under-resourced Black mother for what is actually the impact of historical and intergenerational trauma. So, really taking a note of the fact that there's just been so many policies that have worked against Black familial success within a racialized American society.
Thank you. So according to statistics here, you have the 94% Black victims were killed by Black offenders. Then compare and contrast, 86% white victims were killed by white offenders. So usually you see on the 6 o'clock news is the Blacks killing Blacks, Blacks killing Blacks. Breaking news at 6, 2 people were shot. What they don't focus on is whites killing whites. People usually kill people usually in the area what they live in. So if you're living in the suburbs, you usually do that. You hear about kids, got a school, got a gun. He went into little Johnny, got a gun from his daddy's gun cabinet, went into the school and shot up the whole school. All right. Or they go inside of a grocery store, there's a bomb, or so you see a big increase in that, but people don't focus on, they focus on the Black. So violence is violence, no matter where it's coming from, it's wrong. And so usually we want to dispel those myths and confront that and deal with those, okay? Especially working with youth that's going to be coming in, that we're working with, that we don't, stereotype them, but we give them the tools that they can be resilient in the face and of racialized society, and they can triumph and excel and do what they need to do in their lives.
So just to do a little bridge now, for about the next 30 minutes before we end, we're going to hear a lot more about Clem's personal experiences in his life and in his work.
Yes. So in 1968, you see this, and in 2020, you see this. Put in the chat, what's your thoughts right there? What's your thoughts? 1968, we see this. In 2020, we see this with George Floyd. Nothing has changed. That's right. History repeating itself. Yes. Yes. It still continue. The struggle continue. So that's why we're having these conversations, and that's so true. And why mental health has really been really severe due to the generation. Okay.
So,
Trichology, I like that one.
so thank you so much, Clem, for really
Thank you.
bringing this historical context to all of us. Right. And I just wanted to say to the audience that this historical overview is just in no way comprehensive, as people spend their whole careers really studying Black history in America. Right. So at the same time, we also want to remind everyone that Clem is one Black man living in a racialized society as well. Right. And so no one person can represent the entire an entire group of people. And as you listen to Clem's story, please keep in mind the context of the environments he grew up in Wisconsin, and also understand the ways that intergenerational and historical trauma impacted his story. And also, of course, reminding everyone to make sure that you're using those coping skills you teach your youth and families if any part of this story is distressing to you, or if any parts of his story distress you after as well. So, with that being said, Clem, I really want to ask you, right, what are some of the messages that you've received about expectations of Black youth when you were growing up, and how did they impact the direction of your childhood and adolescence?
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. It's a good question. So yeah, it impacted me. I grew up with, with the Black youth, and my mother was a single mom. She did the best that she can do. And so it definitely impacted me. She had 7 children. She had five boys and 2 girls. So my thought was, here, and my daddy had 19 children, so I'm number 18. All right, so he didn't grow up in the home with us. All right, he believed in being fruitful and multiply. I'll explain that another time. But anyway, so with that, growing up as a man, our belief was, if you were to fight, you swing first. So I was taught to fight. I was taught to go get your own. I was taught it's okay to have, multiple different women, so growing up as a child and adolescent, I was taught that it's okay to sell drugs. I was taught that it was okay to be a part of a gang culture. So that's the belief of things that I grew up with. My mother, that's some of the things I learned from as a youth, but my mother wanted to instill with me was, get your education. She's always taught, go work hard and the traditional way, and work hard at your job and do the best that you can do. So she grew up in the civil rights era and all that Jim Crowism at that time. So she was born in 1932. My dad was born in 1922. So those are some of the things that I not just heard. I heard personally about the struggles that they're going through. So as an adolescent, I was taught to be hard. Don't be no punk. Stand up for yours, and so can a man fight? Yes, so those are some things I learned, and that helped shape the direction of my life right there. So growing up, this picture right here is a picture of my old elementary school where I was at. There's so many kids who start coming to our school that the school was called Franklin Annex. I went to Benjamin Franklin Elementary. And with that school, they transferred us because it was too many. So 5th and 6th grade, I went to 29th Street School. It used to be a school there where those weeds are at. So at that time, the recession of 1974 and 80 and 81, the Great Recession, it really much impacted the Black and Latinos X communities. So in Milwaukee, we have a place called A.O. Smith. They make car parts. So thank you. What I did was I heard a lot of I hear them, talking about, well, we can ready to move this A.O. Smith down south. I said, what do y'all mean? They're going to move it to another foreign country to make money. So they start moving A.O. Smith, Master Lock. So these big companies that my parents came from the South. It was the great migration from the South to the North to make money. So you can raise, with 10 kids, you can make $40,000 and raise a kid in that economy at that time. So it was a global economy exchange then, and that was happening right there. So I started thinking, this ain't gonna work, So next slide. So my thoughts, what is your thoughts of seeing this in the chat responses? You're seeing this person handing this person a cigarette, and the other person scratching his hand. So what happens here? Peer pressure, that's correct. So me coming up as a kid, I started dealing with a lot of peer pressure. So I had guns around me. I had marijuana around me. I had powder cocaine around me. I had gangs around me. I had prostitutes around me. I had killers around me. I had pimps around me. I had violence. I didn't see no doctors or no lawyers hang around my community. You know, I didn't see that. I saw street pharmacists, yeah, that was dealing drugs. I saw guys that was pulling up with big diamond rings on and that kind of stuff. I saw that. So this is what I looked up to at that time. Okay. And so when I went to school, I read about Columbus discovered America, but then that was truthful because according to Native, I believe they discovered America. So just learning and reading and going back in my communities, this says something totally different. So this is what I encountered as a youth. Next slide. So with this, it influenced.
I didn't say anything. Sorry, I was muted. I was talking, but I was muted. Okay. But you know, how did what you talked about so far contribute to your recovery journey and your experiences with the mental health, substance use, and criminal justice systems? And what positive sources of support helped you along the way? Okay, so for me, early on, so by the age of 12 years old, one of my friends, may rest in peace, was shot and killed. He was 14 years old. He got shot 3 times, and me and him used to hang out together. So that really devastated me right there. About a year later, one of his brother had got out of prison, and we threw a party for him. He got out of jail, juvenile jail. He's like 15, 16. His name was Kenny. He was about 6'7", 6'8", about LeBron height. And he was a really good guy. And we threw a party for him. He said, man, I got a headache. I'm going home. He goes home and go to sleep. He dies in his sleep. So now I'm not just at 13, 14 years old. I'm just dealing with a lot of trauma here. My mother was had got a nosebleed beaten by my dad. So me and my younger brother goes over there with a gun to take care of their business because we protect ours for where we come from. So a lot of the things that was going on, my sister was into domestic violence. So me and my younger brother became like the protector of the family. And it became like a survival mode. So really angry and volatile. My mother worked the best she can do. I had a brother who's 10 years older than me. So I got a brother who's Irish, Indian, and Black. So they don't look like me. They look like the guy, the Mac. I mean, not the Mac, Superfly, with the long, pretty hair and really light skin. So we look like my dad's side of the family. So coming up as a kid, I saw the differences and the favoritism in the family, me and my younger brother. So he comes in and he drives in a nice car, and he introduced me to marijuana. So he said, this is how you sell marijuana. So I started selling marijuana about 13 years old, got involved in that, did pretty well for myself, 13, 14, making $200 or $300 a day or a week or something like that. So just making some money. So by this time, he had seen me, and one of the house rules, my mother had house rules, do not have company in her house while she's gone. You know, so I had some friends over, and some friends come over, we're smoking marijuana, and we're shooting dice in her basement. So he comes in, and he found out, and he told the guys, you have to leave. So they left the house. When they leave the house, he's on the phone with my mother, and he said, yeah, this little dude with a couple of experts, blink, 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 you're out of order. You know, I said, what do you mean? You got somebody in mama's house. So he grabs a phone, those old rotary phones, and it hit me upside the head and said, Negro, you're not my brother anyway. And blood started to gush out the top of my head. And I had a lot of pain and anger and resentment there. So a lot of trauma, a lot of things that went through. You're not going to be nothing. You ain't nothing. You ain't my brother. So that right there was an issue. Started using marijuana and continued to deal with my mental health because that was the trauma. My sister was shot with a sawed-off shotgun, left for dead. And so she was dying in the ambulance. I was smoking weed. And so just a lot of things was happening at that time. By this time, my younger brother was really angry because his secondary trauma is even worse with mental health because you start to deal with your psyche.
So he was like, nobody's going to touch me. I'm going to eliminate the threat. So mental health was real live and unfortunately doing really harm to me at that time. So I was doing marijuana, drinking. So my brother got indicted, goes to federal prison. The one that hit me upside the head. He moves back home with us. I'm about 15 years old, 16 years old. And he moves back in. Now he introduced me to powder cocaine. So this is how you sell powder cocaine. So I started weighing it up, you know, a quarter, half ounce per. So I knew how to weigh the drugs up and sell it and make a profit. So pretty much he shows me how to do it. And I'm snorting powder cocaine at 15 years old, selling powder cocaine and marijuana, smoking marijuana too at the same time. Playing basketball for high school at the same time too as well. So just involved in that lifestyle. That's how my substance use started. So using the substance use, using alcohol, marijuana, cocaine, those are my drugs of choice, powder cocaine to deal with my emotions. By the time I move on, about 21 years old, about 17 years old, finally graduated high school, didn't know what to do with my life because I'm around all these people, negative influences. One of my guys said, let's go to the military. I said, I don't want to go to the military, man. I don't know. I like this marijuana too much. I like fast money too much. I like fast women too much. He said, no, let's get out of here. So finally get involved with, I said, let me go to the military. I signed up for the military, the Air Force, and I then passed the drug test. So that was my excuse to say, forget it. I'm going to stay here. One of the beliefs they told me, my brothers and sisters, if you be good to the game will be good to you. But they didn't tell me about the consequence that comes along with it. So I got addicted to the lifestyle with the jewelry, the clothes, the things that I seen on TV, the exploitation. I believed in that, and I believe that wholeheartedly. So into violence, into the gang culture, and that right there. So let me see, the crack cocaine epidemic came like 1986.
Not that old, Clem.
I wasn't born in 1886. So 1986. How am I doing on time, Daniel? How am I doing on time?
Yeah, we have about 20 minutes left total. So
okay, let me
just
kind of
letting
wrap
you know,
this up. Yeah. So pretty much the crack cocaine epidemic we get connected with some of the guys from Compton, California, and here in Milwaukee. And I was always one of those brave type dudes. I had heart. So let me try some of this, man. What are you talking about? Crack cocaine. So I smoked it, and next thing you know, I was addicted. For the next 19 to 20 years of my life was a living hell. You know, so by this time I lost weight. By this time I was in and out of jail, doing time in house correction, state jail, you know, just in and out of those systems, in rehab, in treatment. And so finally, after going in and out of treatment, I finally got into a 90-day program, and I got out of the program and completed successfully. So I got out in 1996. I got out and didn't look back. I went back to those communities though. So today I got over 20 years of recovery, grateful recovering person, 20 years, glory be to God. Yes, I'm no longer a crack cocaine addict, no longer a criminal. I'm a businessman, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a family guy, and I'm sitting here doing what I'm doing right now. So what are the positive supports? So what helped me is along the way was my mentors were former Vietnam vets. That's me right there. As a lost young man, 6'3", 6'2", I believe. Yeah, I think I'm getting shorter. Didn't know what I want to do. There's a documentary that was done in Milwaukee called the 53206, where it said we have the highest incarceration rate in the country. That's where I grew up at. At that time, me and my brother, that's my younger brother right there. Yeah, Curtis to the left. That's me, confused guy. Mentorship helped me. My belief is the only time you look down on a man is when you're helping him up. And those counselors looked at me and I saw potential. They loved me until I could love myself. Because I didn't know who I was. I was a dead man walking. And so with that, I thought I was going to die like that. Don't no man go to jail. Don't no man get education. Don't do that. You stay out here in these streets. So me in those nightclubs, You know, me hanging out in gangs and violence, didn't know who I was, strung out on crack cocaine, lost weight. One guy put a gun to my head and squeezed the trigger and the gun jammed. But I'm here today to let you know that I'm a miracle. Because I went into the church, and the church for me helped me. And it helped me find out who I am. I'm not who you say you are on the media. I'm a royal priesthood. I'm a divine child of God. I'm a mighty warrior. I'm a mighty man of God. So those are things that helped me. So I stopped looking at the social media and the propaganda. I started looking at what scripture said about who I was and not whose I was, that I'm a thug. And I also let them know that it's not where I come from, it's where I'm at today. So that I'm not going to let no zip code define who I am as a person. You know, and so I got into martial arts. I always was a martial artist. I like martial arts, but I was under the influence of drugs and alcohol, so I could not fight like I should. And so my teacher, my sensei said, do not, you know, right now you got to be sober, brother. You can't be involved in martial arts when you're on the influence of drugs and alcohol. So I couldn't stop using. So I continued to use, but I stopped. I did fall off when I went back for a year in that community because everything in that community told me that I would not make it. And so I fell off because I lost a job because the guy fired me because the Milwaukee Brewers lost, the baseball team. So I went back for a binge use for a short period of time. But anyway, I went to Narcotics Anonymous too. That helps. Whatever helped your client to get sober, that's what you want to provide for them. Don't judge them. Meet them where they're at. So these counselors did not judge me. They were from Chicago and they're from Detroit. And so I'm grateful, and I'm standing on some shoulders of some giants that helped me see me. And they're in their 70s now, or some of them have passed on. They inspired me to keep going. Keep going. Offer these youth support in a racialized society. Don't look down. You can change anything. You can change anything if you want to be changed. So that's me on the right-hand side, that me changed today. All right, so the next slide. So these are some of the young men that look like me that's in Milwaukee. You know, they say, well, the rap music doing it. Well, many things are doing it. It's just not rap, because you have heavy metal, you have rock and roll, you have Satanism, you have a lot of different music. So it ain't just rap. We just can't blame it on all the Black people. The rap that I came off of, which was Tupac and NWA and you know, Public Enemy, talked about the ills of society that was happening. Unfortunately, these young brothers, not all of them, but a lot of them don't talk about the consciousnesses. They talk about it's okay to sell drugs. It's okay to promote genocide. It's okay. And the people that's over top of them that's promoting this getting paid. So it goes back to the propaganda, political propaganda and Black exploitation to make money off people's misery. And why they're getting paid? Because they don't live in these communities, but I do. And so what I do is I talk and let these young kids know that you're more than a rapper. We need you to become a lawyer so you can bail your cousin out. We need you to speak against genocide because we don't want no more people to die. We need you to start speaking about life and not death. So when you're working with these youth are geniuses. These youth are intelligent. They've just been sold the lie that it's okay to make money off people's misery. So we have to dispel those lies. What does it have to do with mental health? It has a lot to do with it, because these young brothers are dealing with the same mental health that I was dealing with. So how do we support our Black youth today? Youth-guided engagement. I'm glad you asked.
So how are some of those struggles that you experience in your youth similar or different from some of the struggles you see in the Black youth you work with today? Thank you, Daniel. That's a good question.
Some of the struggles I'm dealing with today is even worse than what I've been through. Because now at an early age, the youth, the prison, the school, the pipeline to prison piece, where a lot of the kids don't want to go to school because of the curriculum and the information is worse. They don't understand it. And when you have, no disrespect, because I had white teachers who used to get on me in school. Education is awesome. I love it. But we got to try a different eclectic approach to reaching these youth. So it's totally different. If they're glued to the curriculum, they're going to lose them. you have to deal with those issues. You say, well, no, it's the parents, no fault. It's the whole societal fault is the issue. Well, I'm not responsible for, raising these kids, and the parents should do that. Well, that's true. I believe it, but the parent and the school. So we should come in collaboration with that. So yes, it's different. It's worse because of what's happening. We see in our communities, there's no resources for them. In Milwaukee, Wisconsin, there's no after-school programs. You got to have the money for those. So you have the parents who's impoverished. They don't have the resources. Well, the kids kind of just hang around the neighborhood. They do their own thing. When I was coming up, we did have resource youth programs, but unfortunately, me and some of my other peers, we were the cause of some of that. Not all of it, were cause of some of that because we fought and break dancing. It was popular out. We would break dance, and when we stopped break dancing and pop locking, they had the crack cocaine came out communities. Then we started having guns. So that was unfortunately due to the governmental and communal wise. Someone it takes a village to raise a kid. That's so true. But the village has left and there's no neighborhood. The neighbor has left and there's left the hood. The resources were stripped out of our community. Where now the resources are in the suburbs and the rural areas, and we don't have anything in our community. So that's why it's so different now. It's gentrification in our communities now. In those communities where I grew up, they're building condos. Those are big old nice buildings that we once did construction. There are apartment lofts, and they got gyms, and they got a Starbucks in there, and they got green space. They moved us out. So, next slide, please.
Clem, actually, we have about less than 15 minutes left.
Okay.
I was just thinking if maybe we could just skip some of the content slides and just go straight to the next question.
Yes.
And I could do a little summary for everyone. So let me just jump to this next question. So, really, I want to say thank you, Clem, first for really showcasing how things that happen at the policy level now and historically can really manifest in individual traumas and individual experiences.
That's
and
right.
I want to really showcase an appreciation of the awareness of some of the themes I've heard from you so far for all of us to really take it in, right? So there's this way that Blackness is exploited, whether for labor, for entertainment, or for profit, or something else. The way that rates of poverty are systematically preserved and how that negatively affects entire communities.
Yeah.
The role that racist institutions have had in disempowering and disenfranchising Black youth and families, preventing the creation and maintenance of Black joy and success, and subsequently promoting the path to prison. The relationship among high rates of substance use, American laws and policies, and how that criminalization and racialization of substance use has led to significantly higher rates of incarceration with the disproportionate impact on Black men, and the way that there exists really this kind of modern day version of slavery that takes away the rights of convicted felons while imprisoned and after serving their time, and really altogether just this violent impact all of these have had on families. And so really looking back, were there things that you now realize would have been helpful for you that were not offered or available to you? And how does that guide the ways that you support Black youth?
Yeah, that's good. Like I said, resources available that really would be helpful. A lot of stuff was not offered to me, like I said, because we didn't have the resources. We had to have Cub Scout and all that kind of stuff. Those are my early years, but my mother, didn't have the resources available for me to even go to that kind of stuff. So just being able to have more resources. They don't have a lot of things available now to support the Black youth. You have to have you don't have to have, but it's usually a two-parent home who have the income, or mother, dad, whoever's raising the kid, they have the resources available to help them out. Next slide. Okay, so I have a youth that really did really well. This youth right here was in foster care. He was the cop that had him was a cop, and his wife both were cops and police officers here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The youth, thank you. The youth pretty much was defiant because he didn't have his primary parents that was there. So the youth now, after coming through counseling, coming through Man and Behavior Service, my organization, the kid is empowered. He felt empowered because I made him feel like a person. I didn't just read and say, so tell me your name. You know, I met him right where he was at. Well, according to statistics, I didn't come with that. I met him, he's a human. So met him right there, gave him a high five. How you doing? Have a seat. Here's some candy. Here's some information. So share with him, walk with him, alongside of him, and make him feel like a whole person. Now today he has his driver's license. He's into trade skills or whatnot. So he felt empowered. Why? Because I engaged him in discussion. Next slide. So grief and loss, a lot of our youth experience today because of what they're seeing and what's going on. The systemic oppression, they see the police brutality, economic oppression. This is what they talk to me about. Am I going to be able to live? I'm going to end up like George Floyd, you know? And I said, no, you're not, as long as you continue to make the right choices. So we got to continue to allow them to express how they feel, because they're coming there to get the help that they need. The next one, some of the clinical approaches you want to use: create an environment for Black youth, you know, to feel welcome, right? What I use is rational emotive behavioral therapy, some of the old school ways that I was taught. And so it's having to think about the consequences. Client-centered approach and not clinician-centered, meaning you putting your expectations on them. I think you should do this, you do that. Or no. What do you want to do? And come alongside them and let them know, even though they're going back in those environments where it's a concrete jungle, that you can make it. You can excel despite what's going on. Okay? Motivational interviewing, giving them affirmations, you know, let them know you're going to be okay. You know, how's that working for you? Give them positive reinforcement, right? Also, allow them to think. They are gentlemen and scholars. They're very intelligent. If you can survive in those environments, then you can thrive in society. So allow them to think. Don't think for them. Ask them to think. And I usually use a reality therapy where, okay, now if you know if your uncle been to jail and your mom has been to jail, what's going to happen to you? What's the reality of you starting a business? Have you written it down? You know, so being able to meet them right where they're at and not letting them know, telling them that that dream is not going to work, because they hear all the negative stuff in their environment. Hopefully they would impact you. We continue to impact them in our practice, all right? Also, we want to come against the non-traditional ways. Talk about the entrepreneurship. If you can sell drugs like I did, and steal and rob people like I was doing, well, you're an entrepreneur. You have to use it in the right way. So if you can sell drugs, you can sell cars. All right. If you can steal clothes, well, you probably have your own clothing line. You know, so start talking about non-traditional ways where some parents will get that job 30 years and work. The civil rights era, my parents, get that job, work 30, 40 years and live off my Social Security, which is good for some people do that. But now, today's society, I see a lot of entrepreneurship opportunities. That's why I promote the youth. And trade skills too is good. Some people are not going to go to community colleges. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Trade skills could be painting. I got a painting trade skill. Carpentry, I do that too. I don't do electrical and plumbing, all right? I do painting and carpentry. That's my trade skill, and I learned as a youth. Also, community colleges. Some people want to go to community college. Allow them to go there and get that. You get a 6-month training certificate. You can become, yes, voice walkers, I love them. Yeah, definitely. Community colleges, yes, go get a trade skill there. Go get a certificate. You can open up your own funeral home. I mean, there's different ways these youth can learn, right? YouTube or podcasts. What are you talking about on YouTube? You can get paid there. You can have a healthy discussion regarding podcasts and what's happening, right? Instead of getting the traditional way where you go to college and get all that debt. With no disrespect, I went to college, but my debt is paid off. All right, so
I'm gonna be there one day with you, Clem.
All
paid
right,
off, no more debt. You know, but we have about 5 minutes left,
okay.
so I just really want to just hone in on the point that there's this idea that individual therapy in like the traditional sense is not the only thing that can be done. And I'm really appreciating the ways that you're thinking about building community as an intervention, right? Like
Yes.
actually helping bridge the connection to empowering social spaces, to supportive and affordable learning environments, to mentorship, to helpful hobbies, interests, and activities.
Yes. So there's some books out there if you want to, you know, those are some good ones right there. Take a snapshot of those. Those are really good if you're working with our Black youth. All right, you want to dispel some of those myths with our Black youth. They're not thugs. They are gentlemen and scholars. Talk to the teachers if you feel uncomfortable, or they're activists or parents. You know, use the platform to lunch and learn. You know, also educate yourself, you know, about those young Black youth. And again, I can't stress it. Like I tell my students, you got to have client-centered instead of clinician-centered. You know, should be, you can show, sympathy is for the parent. Empathy is for us. All right. So, any questions?
So, yes, thank you so much, Clem. I just really want to say I appreciate a lot of what you've talked about so far, especially this idea of expanding mental health and wellness. So it's not just about emotions, it's about financial, physical, spiritual, occupational, and environmental health, in addition to emotional health.
Yeah.
And so we've been collecting questions throughout today's chat, and we have time for just one question. And it seems like there's actually just one question that was asked, right? So what would you say to a young person on the same path you took when you were younger? And what would you suggest to their support network? And for us to just have you share your wisdom in just 2 minutes.
Yes. So I would let them know that, so what do you want to do? Ask the youth, what do they want to do? They was explain, hey, I want to do this or do that. Well, you start up with a plan of action. You know, let's write down your goals and things that you want to do, measurable short-term goals, whether it's 1 month, 90 days, or 1 year. And I'm going to let the youth know, I'm going to walk alongside of you. This is your goal. I'm going to inspire you, if you want to be inspired, to make a difference. So that's where you walk alongside of them, you know, and don't be afraid of the youth. Meet them right where they're at and let them know that it's never over. It's always hopeful, that you can excel and do anything if you put your mind to it. That's what I would tell them.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Clem, for a really great presentation. And thank you for everyone for attending today's webinar. You can really reach Clem through emailing him here, Clem Richardson 2011@gmail.com. We also do have a list of references, which you can download from our website once it's posted in a few days. We also want to invite you to join us for our upcoming events, Be a Safe Space, addressing teen dating violence on February 24th at 11 o'clock Eastern time. And we also want to release a telehealth tool for providers later this month as well. So please visit our website for a full list. All the information will be at ctechny.org, which will have helpful information, including the recording and slides to this presentation, which will be posted within the next 2 to 3 business days. Thank you so much, everyone. Our coordinator will be sending a link in the chat box. I think it's already done, so you can complete our brief feedback survey. Once you leave the webinar, you will also receive that feedback survey in case you're unable to complete it now. On behalf of CTAC and Mr. Clem Richardson, thank you for joining us today. Have a great rest of your day. If you have any other questions, please contact us at ctac.info@nyu.edu. And really much love to the chat today. Really on fire. I really love the active participation. Clem, any final words?
No, thank you for having me. Like I said, thank everybody for listening in. And remember, you're great. You do great work. If anybody ever told you, today I want to let you know that you're awesome, because you're working with those youth, Black, brown, and yellow youth out there. So continue to inspire, continue to educate, continue to elevate them, and watch what happens.
Thank you so much for that wonderful message. Have a good day, everyone.
Have a good day.